Good evening and welcome to The Square. Tonight's discussion is the 7th segment of our Burning Issues edition, where we, the resident Square panelists, discuss issues that you, our viewers on our social media platforms, have put forward to us. Tonight, in general, we're going to review the year 2019, as well as look at expectations from the resident panelists on the year 2020. From governance to social commentary to regional politics, we're going to discuss a couple of things, as well as issues that you have put forward to us. My name is Dan MPC, host of The Square, and I am joined tonight by The Square's resident panelist. Charlie Harbour is the Square resident panelist. Charlie,
Diana,
good to have you. I'm good.
Good. Nice to be here too.
And I like your shirts.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, these Uzi guys are upping their game.
Absolutely.
Your dress is also looking fabulous.
Asante. Thank you. As always, we're also joined by Berna Namata, resident panelist of The Square. Berna, great to have you.
Thank you, Diana.
Great.
Lovely dress.
Thank you. Thank you. Your collection. So before we begin, as we always do, we're going to have a midweek recap, things that have caught our attention so far during the week. It's been an eventful year already. Not even the week. I think 2020 as a year has just been a bit too much.
Yeah.
I've seen people on social media calling for it to end already. It's just calamity after calamity. But Charles, I'll start with you. Is there anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, a sad one on the passing of Kobe Bryant and the daughter. Kobe, symbol of basketball, young man, only 41 years old, done so much for himself, for the Lakers, for NBA. Extremely tragic. And to pass with his daughter, that helicopter crash, it's very sad.
I know, and you as a dad of girls, I mean, I can imagine how it resonated.
Yeah.
Right?
It's tough.
It's tough. But also, one thing I noticed about the Kobe Bryant death was, and we were talking about social media last week, if you remember, and how it, people they're more into the breaking news syndrome, as opposed to getting factual, accuracy. And I saw TMZ broke the story apparently before even his family knew about it. So I was thinking about that in our conversation last week on the ills of social media. Brenna, is there something you'd like to add?
Yeah, natural disasters. I mean, like you said, it's only January, 4 weeks of the year, and full-scale natural disaster. The locusts, flooding. So you can only imagine if you're in charge of disaster preparedness. And most of the time, in fact, disaster preparedness for a very long time has been focused on food security and probably refugee crisis. Now disasters come from all angles. Yeah, so how you deal with that, really. Yeah, because, we had the fires in Australia, and now we are seeing with the locusts.
As well as the coronavirus.
Yes, and then,
It's a hectic year.
It is.
And we're just less than 4 weeks into it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we are going to kick off by discussing burning issues that we on The Square think are worth discussing, reviewing 2019 and looking at what expectations we have in store for 2020. But before we begin, we'll just start off by reading a couple of tweets from you, our viewers, that you'd like us to discuss. We'll see if we have time for them in addition to what we already prepared. And the first tweet we have is from KV1B3, who says that, how about you all discuss about how rape victims are treated in our society? I was really heartbroken seeing all the shade being thrown at that girl who recently came out and told her story. It seems like being the victim is the sin. And before we go to the next tweet, I think what she's talking about is to do with the Miss Rwanda. There was a young contestant who came out and said she was raped defiled raped at the age of 6 years old. And a lot of the feedback, the flack that she got was from other people, adults especially, women and men, kind of blaming the victim, which is terrible. And Brenna, maybe you might weigh in on that later on in the show.
Yes, I have my issues with Miss Rwanda, so...
We'll weigh in on that later in the show. So the next tweet is from Frank Kigenza, and Frank states that in his tweet, please save and preserve 1930 prison, our history, our heritage. It is important to keep for generations after us. It will be a shame if 1930 is not heritage listed. The cathedral can find another place.
Hello,
I
Frank.
fully concur.
Hello,
Okay,
Frank.
we'll
I'm Catholic. I'm Catholic.
And you're
I fully
Catholic.
concur.
Our next tweet is from Denise, and Denise says one of the things she'd like to see discussed is hygiene issues. How do we ensure we maintain high levels of hygiene while security is not compromised? Ladies' handbags are searched with bare hands at most public places where there are no scanners, while we are not sure where these hands have been. Recommend gloves, please.
Wow,
I know we
that's a
talked
good
about
one.
hygiene
Yeah, that's a good
on
one.
the show a couple of times. And then the last tweet, based on what you'd like us to discuss, this tweet states that, and this is from Barnabas, who says, Rwanda's preparedness to prevent coronavirus from crossing its borders. Yeah, I think this is something maybe in the coming months that we'll have to discuss with someone from the Ministry of Health to just understand what measures are being put in place. But so far, I know that they deployed people at the airport who are screening, just for this particular virus. So I think they're already ahead of the game. So thank you for your tweets, and we'll just kick into the first segment, which is to do with governance and citizen engagement. Now, as you know, 2019 was quite an eventful year. We had, in terms of governance and citizen engagement, from mayors resigning to going back to the drawing board regarding social welfare categorization, also known as Ubudehe, from citizens actually challenging national laws. There's been a lot of accountability, there's been a lot of engagement, and some issues being taken to the public sphere. So I want to ask you, in terms of 2019, because it's very broad, we're trying to talk about many issues for the year that has been, but just starting with governance and citizenship, and Bernard, I'll address the first question to you. In terms of governance and citizen engagement, what are some key issues that stood out for you, like one or two, and what expectations do you have in this regard in the year 2020?
First of all, I think that in terms of governance, it gets better every year, and across board. Mm-hmm. And I like that most of this is internally driven. There's no external pressure, but you clearly see that internally there's a common understanding and agreement that we have to get better and avoid a sense of complacence. And I think we've seen this, we saw this throughout the year. Again, the resignations, it goes back to accountability, trying to see results. Then Umushtirano. Mm-hmm. With Umushtirano, what we see, again, citizen engagement. One issue that I will not forget from Umushtirano was the arrears that haven't been paid by government.
To the private sector?
Private sector, but also specifically local government, where people within Ubudehe, mm-hmm. like Category 1, are given work which is expected to help them, and then they should be paid, and that's how you empower them. Mm-hmm. So to find that these people are not actually being paid and haven't mm-hmm. received their money, I think that was a problem. But at the same time, the fact that it came from within, I think, was out of recognition that internally there's an internal process that is ongoing in terms of ensuring that there's accountability, especially at local levels. I think the other key reform we have seen is within land, a lot of digitalization, trying to ensure that the process is transparent. Many countries around Africa continue to struggle with land issues because there's no digital information of the land, but we're seeing increasingly, for instance, land issues are being resolved because of the digital platforms. The other issue that I think for me stood out last year was mice, because 10 years ago when Rwanda was talking about the ambition around mice, there were many doubts that, as usual, you're a small country, you should be focusing on feeding the poor, usually those are the arguments. But what we were seeing, 2019 really, mice came in strongly. And even this year, we will see that it's definitely growing year in, year out. And we're also seeing that key sectors around mice, and that's tourism, the linkages within the economy. Last year, I think we saw that coming out very strongly. The economy was really supported internally because of those, the activities around mice. My final one would be on security. There were so many challenges last year, and for me, when I reflect on how the security agencies were able to decisively deal with the threats, I think they deserve a pat, well done.
Pat on the back,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
I agree with you.
Because like they were firefighting from all corners, and they came out very strongly. Minimal damage, which we tend to take for granted. Sometimes I feel like as Rwandans, we've gotten so used to being secure that even when there's an issue, we don't really think it could be a problem. Yeah, so last year I think is when we really saw our security coming out and saying, look, as they've already said, nothing can happen without security. We have to first ensure that your safety before anything. So, yeah, for me, really.
Those are the key issues that stood out for you. Charles?
Yeah, I want to go to governance and citizen accountability, which is where you kick this off, Diana. Rwanda works. It's very difficult to fault Rwanda on those two fronts. We have a lot of homegrown solutions. It's one of the areas where we have come up and said, no, we have a problem, let's fix it, and it actually gets fixed. Through all the different initiatives you can imagine, from Umuganda level all the way to Mushichirano, Rwanda Days, leadership retreats, mention it. There is Meet the President, all these citizen outreach programs. To that extent, Rwanda works, and where you're found to be flat-footed as a leader, you will face the boot. So to that extent, it's extremely good. Is it rosy? No. Are there areas in which you can improve? Definitely yes. And I'd like to talk about two specific areas that I believe need to be worked on. One is something that keeps recurring in the Auditor General's report, and that is around the strength of boards and the functionality of boards of government business enterprises. I think that's a serious governance gap that whether it is the Rwanda Governance Board or the appointing authority or the Auditor General's office or whoever is in charge of this, I think it's something, it needs to stop being a song, and we actually have a strong function of boards that should even be held accountable. Because if the Companies Act today will hold directors of a company liable for bringing down that company, in the same breath, the board of directors of these government business enterprises should be held accountable for the non-performance of their institutions. That's number one. Number two is we need to devise a mechanism where we relieve the head of state of a lot of pressure. And I'll give you examples. When something is not moving, people will rush onto Twitter and tag the head of state. When we have a Rwanda Day somewhere, or meet the president somewhere, or Mushichirano, people will wait for the head of state to come, and sometimes the issues are really burning, and some few people have failed to get redress, But quite often you also realize that it is not a matter that should be raised to that level. So you ask yourself, does this person not know that there are other channels through which they can address their grievances? Or is it that they know and they deliberately refuse to go through those channels and bring the matter to the head of state because they have no faith in their system, or once bitten, twice shy, they've tried other means and they've failed? I think it's a blend of the two, because sometimes I'll never forget someone who was on the verge of annoying me at Rwanda Day in Bonn the other day. The guy asked the president for directions to the RIB offices. And you ask yourself, somebody you have golden opportunity to interact with once in I don't know how long, and you be as trivial as that. So my concern really is twofold. One, on the sustainability, I don't think it's a very sustainable thing. But two, what does it say about the tier below the ministerial level,
so
at the governor,
I wanted to probe you on that. Yes.
The mayors and all that level. They should as much as possible have further engagement. So that some of these things are not really presidential material, and they should not be brought up there. Yeah.
So in terms of citizen engagement, there needs to be more done by the second tier that you're talking about before these issues reach our head of state.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
I agree. Do you want to comment on that, Brenna?
Yeah, I feel that when it comes to social media, really, it's difficult to control what happens on social media. You don't own the platform. It's a very... it's not local, because most of the time someone will be tweeting from not even within. So how do you address that?
But I think what I picked up mostly from Charles was social media is like a tiny aspect of it. The main thing is when you're going into communities, and or when you have conventions where there are people, whether it's in Rwanda, whether it's out of Rwanda. I mean, by the time there are issues raised to the president, they should already have been taken care of before they're actually put forward in those gatherings, whether it's community, whether it's internationally. So our leaders need to engage more with citizens before such issues are flagged. They don't need to reach that level.
I think that
means certain leaders are probably not doing their job, and people feel underserved.
You always have those who are not doing their job, but the majority would be doing their job.
Absolutely.
But what we have now with the social media generation is that they feel that once they ask a question, you must respond. And I mean, there are processes. Anybody who has worked in any organization, it takes long to, get decisions to be done, to be taken, the signatures. It takes a long process. But sometimes someone will ask a question, or if they've been to an office and probably the person they met in the office is just a clerk. The DJ in that office who is supposed to take a decision probably is on a trip or he is on an assignment. You come back the next day, you say, oh, I've been here 2 days, I haven't got a response. So I'll go to social media and complain because I brought my dossier and it is 2 or 3 days. I think some of it is really unrealistic, and how you are able to see what are legitimate concerns and what is not legitimate. I think that is where the issue lies. And back to last week's show, if you have a social media team that is strong, then they would know what is legitimate and what is not legitimate. Because these days you have bots tweeting, which may even create a crisis that is not, they will create an artificial crisis, or you will have people who are in the business of misinformation, and they will be tweeting all the time wrong information, expecting you to respond to misinformation. Thirdly, now it's even advanced to a level where, for instance, you post a speech and it's edited and reposted, and then someone drives a different narrative, and you're expected to spend a lot of time trying to explain that no, this was the original message. Yeah. So
I get in terms of social media, within that remit, it's difficult, but within the issue Charles was raising of some issues just don't need to reach that level, I totally agree. Yeah. We're going to the next segment of the conversation, which is to do with investments. I know Brenna, you raised this last week when we were talking about how various institutions engage with social media. When they give out reports and they put certain numbers, this and this investment, or these and these plans for construction, but what do they really break down into? But my question is not to do with that, it's just reminding you of your comment last week, but this is to do with investments that were made in the year 2019. So according to official figures from RDB, Rwanda registered more than $2.46 billion worth of investments in 2019, and this is an increase of 22.6% compared to last year. So very broadly, my question to you, and I'll start with Charles. What does this mean to you as a Rwandan citizens? The majority of this was in energy, followed by other sectors such as mining and so forth and so on. But when you see these numbers that really look good and really look good for the country as well, for you as an ordinary citizen, what does it mean to you, and what expectations do you have of these investments that were released by RDB this month?
A few things, and I can't really enlist them, but the ones that really stand out is it's very easy for you to hit such targets when you look at big ticket investments. Mm-hmm. If you look at energy, if you look at infrastructure projects, and real estate projects. Mm-hmm. So if you're to single out Bugesera International Airport deal, you single out, for instance, DP World deal, mm-hmm. or you single out Bisate Lodge deal, mm-hmm. And I'm sure there are a few others in energy and what have you. It's extremely very easy to hit these targets, and I personally would not have very good grounds for second guessing RDB's statistics. That's not where the point is. I believe that for us to be able to sustain that very good picture, we need to tally those numbers with a few other pointers, notably job creation, change of livelihoods. I was extremely impressed the other day, about 2 weeks ago, I went to the Bugesera Industrial Park in the Eastern Province. I even tweeted about it. I was mesmerized. Mm-hmm. I engaged a Ministry of Commerce official who works in the district of Bugesera, and he told me there is a policy that all the industries there are actually supposed to employ people who come from that area. I
think that's the first of its kind in Rwanda.
Yes, I engaged a few of the staff who were there, very sharp guys. I spoke to these ladies who are working at a company that manufactures fridges and ovens, and it's extremely impressive. Is it a story we should tell? Definitely yes. Is it a story that is being told? I don't think so. I think we are losing it somewhere along there. We have a story to tell that we are not telling. And whoever is watching or cares to listen, let's not drop the story along the way. There is a good story to be told. Equally important is a lot of the investors you will engage will say, it's very, very recently RDB set up a department for aftercare. It's, in my opinion, it is the busiest department in RDB. Because it is one thing to bring in an investor, but to keep them in here and make sure all their issues are solved. Some of them can never be solved. The RDB has no control. You're talking, Abana, you're talking earlier on about people being paid and being paid on time. RDB has no control on whom in Ecofin will pay or not pay on time. Yes, so it's the story is one thing, but the real job is around keeping businesses, keeping the business machinery oiled and keeping businesses happy and the investors looking forward to do yet another investment.
So for you, if you were to just narrow it down, what would you be looking forward to? What expectations would you have based on this in this year? And in the long term, but just starting with 2020.
I think it's a rosy picture, number one. Number two is I still insist that a lot more emphasis needs to be put in the mechanism of making sure businesses are sustainable. You know, the cost of finance is still extremely high. People being paid on time is a huge impediment towards business growth. Those are some of the two things that immediately come into my mind, because government will do quite a lot. You can fault them. You may not fault them in things like putting infrastructure where roads were not existing before. You know, some of the other big ticket items, but the areas where they can improve, a lot more needs to be done, because the investor who will tell the story is the investor who is making money. It's not necessarily the investor who is coming into the country. Yes.
And who has remained here because of aftercare facilitation.
Yes.
Bryna?
I feel that RDB has really done a great job. They've expanded, I mean, like, year in, year out. And my big idea for whoever established RDB, I think RDB needs an oversight.
What do you mean?
We need an agency, or because currently RDB does accountability via Parliament, I think the Public Accounts Committee, and because the CEO of RDB is actually a member of Cabinet, so she reports to Cabinet. But I think beyond Cabinet, we need an institution or whatever they call it.
Don't you think that will just add to more bureaucracy?
I don't think so. I will explain why. Going back to the aftercare, RDB is doing things all the time. Aftercare came because there were so many complaints of, oh, you just register investors, and then you don't care what happens after. Then they came up with aftercare. But if the core mission of RDB was to attract investment, I feel that tracking the investment, the actual investment, there should be someone in charge of that, even the aftercare, so that RDB focuses on attracting investment. Right now, it's too much. I think
you feel they're inundated with too many,
there are
too many things.
Yeah, I feel that at some point, almost today as we speak, RDB has so many units. And I think the bigger it gets, over time it will be difficult. In the last 5 years or so, RDB has had several reforms. I don't know whether those reforms, one can confidently say they have been effective or not. I don't know. But we know that RDB continues to do a lot of work and it's making progress. But how about we start thinking over who takes over some of these responsibilities permanently? Because what we see, for instance, if you bring in an investor, then they have to deal with Rwanda Revenue, or they have to deal with Ministry of Trade in between. The investor will still refer to, when I came, I spoke to RDB, they gave me a license. And then you find that for RDB, it is overwhelming, in my view, watching from a distance, to be expected to bring in an investor, but still follow up on, I think it's too much. It's too much work.
And then also dealing with aftercare, ensuring that, yes, you've registered, you've complied with all the regulations and what have you, and now also ensuring that their business is facilitated to the point whereby in less than a year, it's not like they up and leave, they actually remain here and do business.
Yeah, because
so that's, for you, in your opinion, that
because
is
for me, the other risk, and where you see it is, because again, you have so much pressure on targets, on attracting investment. Of course, investors will follow so many things, the market, incentives, there's so much. So, because investors have a lot of time, and they're targeting, of course, Rwanda, looking at what it is offering. Sometimes we are getting brick-face, investors who will come, we register them, they make a big announcement.
But I thought
We're
we are
excited.
more diligent with briefcase investors since we were.
I'm simply saying
we were victims of them a couple
it
of years
doesn't
ago.
stop. It just gets smarter.
Yeah.
I'll tell you,
Okay.
it just
I
gets
get you.
smarter.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel that whoever is in charge has to start thinking of how, you ensure that RDB continues to do its work.
And stay ahead of the curve.
Yes, and
as well.
yeah.
Because we're also growing exponentially.
Yes.
In terms of the business sector and investments and what have you. So it's important that the institution leading on this stays ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
Let me,
I agree.
Banham, I deal with RDB on a very regular basis. And at the risk of sounding like the unpaid spokesperson, I want to tell you something, Banham. The reforms that have happened at RDB are amazing. When you look at the different departments, I'm actually not worried about how amorphous the institution is, because whoever appoints the people in positions of responsibility at RDB has endeavored to ensure that they are sharp brains, very good resources, senior people running the different departments. So you really don't feel it sometimes, and I'm extremely impressed. The example we're giving earlier on about having to go to an office and because the DG is not there, something will not get done. You don't get that feeling at RDB because the head of department can solve your problem and you will not actually miss seeing the CEO or the deputy CEO because of the caliber of people who are running the show there. Kudos to that. On the contrary, the problem is different. Because the expectations are extremely high with RDB.
From Rwandan citizens.
Yes, and investors.
And investors, yes.
There needs to be, and we sang this song before, and we should not stop singing it until it's actually solved. Then either RDB should be empowered to have the role of coordinating the other people who they need around them to make the business environment conducive, or the Prime Minister's office just has to wake up, because I believe institutional coordination is exactly under them. Because some of the issues that you have is power, for example. You're pushing people towards a certain sector, and they move there very fast. You sign MOUs with them, and then they get there and there's no power. I was giving an example about Bujesera Industrial Park. A lot of industries have already set up. There's no sewer. I know of an affordable housing project somewhere where they have built the houses. Government's role is to put infrastructure, services, water, power. All that has not yet been put there. Right? And then titling. We have driven people to the special economic zones in Masoro and what have you, and he said you come, you get X number of years on your title. A few years down the road, the thought process changes, and you're giving people short leases on their millions of dollar investments.
So when it comes to investments, you're saying there should be serious, deliberate. Okay, I'm sure it's there, but
yes, I think RDB should be given more powers
on institutional coordination.
Yes, on the institutional coordination bit.
Because these blocks don't move at the same time.
Exactly.
And the investor is one who suffers the consequences.
Yes, absolutely. That's the point I'm raising.
And I know Charlie is big on institutional coordination.
I would definitely disagree with Charles on that.
Why?
Yes, because I feel that for anything, as long as it becomes too big, there's bound to be a downfall, So it doesn't happen. It doesn't have to happen tomorrow, but someone has to think about it.
You just want to nip it in the bud.
Yeah, I mean, anything that becomes too big and powerful will become a problem at some point, because even these institutions that you're saying they would coordinate will say RDB has the powers. They will not feel obliged to take the responsibility. And today you still see this. There are institutions who feel they don't have to do much because the accountability will be done by RDB.
Or you actually make a point. They'll say they don't have to do anything, or they do not necessarily have to toe the line that RDB is telling them to toe, because they do not report to RDB.
Yeah.
They have, but again, this comes down to all the governance conversation we're having. And Bana, you said something extremely important, but you dropped it somewhere along the way, around who checks what RDB is doing. And
that was a very good point.
I think you raise a very valid point, because that person would probably be the best ambassador that
that institution
runs to and says, we are being frustrated in terms of moving Rwanda's development agenda because all the institutions are not aligned with us, for instance. And if that can be resolved, I think
it would answer both your arguments. They are parallel, but I think there's an apex point where they meet. If that happened. Well, we are now on to the last couple of minutes of the show, and we're going to break onto social commentary. So we're going to talk about issues that are to do with the social commentary on dealing with things that happened with regards to a couple of things that we've talked about on the show, from mental health to Rwandan values versus popular culture. I think you remember that show. To many other things, Rwanda's creative industry and what have you. But yeah, in terms of the social sphere, what particularly stood up for you last year? And what are some of your expectations with regards to what stood up for you in 2020? And Brian, I'll start with you.
I don't know. You better start with Chelsea.
Because I know you have a mouthful of stuff to say.
No, yeah.
Charles, is there anything that stood up for you last
year?
year?
He's more social than I am.
I think
in the social sphere?
Creative entertainment, and I want to link this with the amount of effort and investment we are putting into MICE tourism. We have had a show around our entertainment industry.
Multiple times?
Yeah, several times, and we'll probably even continue having it. I think we need to understand the entire value chain of MICE. That when we are investing all these billions into Visit Rwanda campaign, and with Arsenal and PSG and everything that we will do, and the convention center and all these things that we will do, that everybody along the chain has to tag along and probably bring them to book and say, if you're a government official who is frustrating MICE in any one way or another, you should be brought to book. We've sung a song about, the other day, my friend who runs Sky Lounge, or Skylux, or Sky Lounge, told me a very heartbreaking story. It's about 3 weeks ago or less, how authorities came into the club with guns, wanted to arrest the owner of the club, confiscated the mixer during the festive season.
But why?
Yeah.
Did they violate something? Noise pollution or
that Kisimenti area? The only person who could have complained that they are making noise for them is the guard of the Kobe station across the road. So it's, I think certain things need to be put within context. There is no way on New Year's Day, on the 31st, we are blowing fireworks at 9 different sites across the country to jubilate. And some people are not happy that we are happy. That the likes of Bana do not like Miss Rwanda, which is a huge celebration of our culture. And it's one of the reasons that why people will come and grab a plane and spend lots of dollars in our hotels to buy a ticket and watch a pageant. So we need to move in the same direction with the same speed all of us, if especially MICE, which is a huge investment that we expect a return from.
And when you say MICE, you're talking about the events, entertainment.
Yes. Everybody
sector.
who comes here for a conference
Yes.
or an event, whether it's sports or whatever, should go back to their countries when they are broke.
When they've spent money.
Yes, they need to leave all their per diem in this country. Yes, but unfortunately, some of those things do not happen. Yeah.
Verna?
I don't know why Charlie feels I have a problem, but it's true. I have my reservations around Miss Rwanda. And,
But do you want to start with what stood out for you, or this is one of the issues that stood out for you last year, in terms of the social sphere that you'd like to see changed in 2020? Or
to be honest,
you have
I don't.
commentary to give?
I don't pay attention to social.
So, what in particular
I don't
caught
pay
your
attention.
attention last year,
I don't
or
pay
that you'd like to
attention.
discuss right now?
I don't pay attention to the social scene, but I remember there were so many events actually. For the first time, I think we had young people organize a concert, which was
Yes.
very successful.
The
What is it
Entertainment Factory people?
Yes.
Yes. The series of, I think they organized 3 or 4 concerts last year.
Yeah,
Yes.
we had several concerts.
Yes.
I think there's progress.
Yes.
There is progress, for
Yeah.
sure there is progress.
Yeah, there's
Yes.
progress.
Yes, for sure there is
But
progress.
my biggest concern goes back to Miss Rwanda.
Tell us why.
There are so many things that this country is not doing and has been under a lot of pressure to do, but they have taken a deliberate decision not to do because of our history. And for me, I feel that Miss Rwanda is one of those things that we have to make a choice and look at the value that Miss Rwanda brings to this country and the kind of problems it will create in the long term. My female views aside, I would never support anything that where women are paraded and one has to decide, beauty. They try to sanitize it around beauty and brains, but to be honest, it's still a beauty contest. That's one. 2, there are several indirect consequences, and we see these sentiments on social media out of Miss Rwanda that make you wonder whether we need it or not.
I'd like you to give some concrete examples.
I
I understand what you're saying, but also for the sake of our viewers, what consequences, what stereotype does it perpetuate? What exactly are we talking about?
Okay, first of all, look at what young girls have to deal with social media. Those who don't like them, the trolls, the harassment. If you can protect them, in my view, I think it benefits our society. That's number 1. Number 2, ethnicity always comes back. Every time we have Miss Rwanda, you can't avoid it because whether you like it or not, whether you brand it as beauty and brains, people will go back to what does this person look like. So are we ready to have that national conversation again? Even if you don't have it when the show is happening, it is happening elsewhere. There are alternative spaces which still come into, the mainstream space. And then let's look at the real value. Yes, you have corporates that are investing money in the contest. But again, being I am biased. I feel like the money MTN invests in Miss Rwanda could be put elsewhere,
Connect Rwanda.
Not even Connect Rwanda. We are struggling to have...
Stopping and instigating.
We are struggling to raise sanitary pads, and this is a basic item. So, but again, corporates will put where they see value for their money. That's fine. I totally understand that. And also someone is trying to grow their business. Miss Rwanda is a franchise. So I understand that. But I think you have to really weigh and say what value at the end of the day, does this bring? What do we lose by not having it and what do we gain by having it?
So for you, if I can just recap what you're saying, very valid points. I think Charles and I agree. in terms of what you said, ethnicity, in terms of harassment of these girls online and offline as well. And the concept, we've debated this on the square, if you remember, with the former Miss Rwanda 2016 and some feminists who were also on the show, stating at the end of the day, if you break it down, you're literally, looking at women, judging them for their physical appearance, which is what you're saying. So for people, it's a business. For some of these girls, it's also an opportunity for them to really, go from one space to another in terms of, not social, but mobility, upward mobility in terms of the access they now have to various things, whether it's exposure, whether it's business opportunities. It does work for some of these girls. But at the same time, your points, we definitely hear you. What alternative then are you stating? I mean, this is a personal opinion, absolutely, but on national TV, with your valid points, what are you saying that we can do better about? Based on the fact that you've raised these important issues about ethnicity and so forth and so on, what do you think would be an alternative? I don't know. Initiative.
To be honest, I'm very half strong.
That still looks at the advantages of Miss Rwanda and still provides continuity to them. But what alternative would you suggest?
I have very strong views about Miss Rwanda.
You've said that
wish
several times.
Yes, I wish I could care more about the money that comes from Miss Rwanda or what
the lives it changes of the girls.
It doesn't really as much because they will give you a car and then you have a few sponsorship, but if you take that money and give it to Ubuhanzi, for instance, at one of those programs, I think that will have more value. And we need original ideas. Miss Rwanda is not original. Now, one will also argue and say we are trying to integrate into the global space because the national contests move into the world space. You have Miss World and all these things. Going back to my earlier argument, it is a question of, do we need it? At what cost? And if the majority feel that, we are better off with it, I'm fine. I'll just stay in
your corner.
Yeah.
Charles, what do you have to say to that?
I want to move away from that. I think those are opinions. I will beg to differ, but you raise some valid points. I'll concur. I think another one that stood out really for me from a social perspective is our state of mental health and mental preparedness and mental decay, for that matter. It bothers me that you have cases of suicides and suicidal attempts, that you have artists and other people being locked up for drug and drug abuse. I hope there is a clear plan by whatever government agency is responsible for that. Locking up people and putting them away is not a solution. We do have a genuine challenge around mental health that we have to talk about very candidly, and I believe that is what is missing. That we all break down. We all break down for one reason or another. You're heartbroken. You've lost a job. You will all break down for you. You're ill. You've lost somebody. You're abusing alcohol and drugs. You've lost your beloved one. You've lost a job. You're broke. For one reason or another, you'll break down. How is this breakdown managed? That's, I think it's a time bomb we sit on here. Yeah.
So you think mental health should be given more weight in social conversations, national conversations?
Correct.
I think it's something we've discussed a couple of times on the square, but I totally agree, especially because we come from a culture whereby we are taught how to, just not talk about certain things and push them down, and this is something where we end up ignoring issues such as mental health.
Yeah, just to emphasize that, and on the few times when we've discussed this, I think it was Laure who did give us some dazzling statistics about I think, if I recall well, that only 22% of cases are actually reported.
Yes.
That means there's another 78% that are dying silently. You ask yourselves, actually, your friends and family, How many times do you say, stay at home, don't tell anybody, we'll manage it, and the person ends up deteriorating further. Yeah, so it's
serious.
yeah.
I'd like us to just read the tweets that we have so far. Thank you for putting your tweets forward. And the first tweet is from Debbie, who states that she's responding to the issues that we raised here, saying, in our office, Rura, we receive investors who've been licensed by RDB, and we do our job as a regulator. The necessary follow-up right after RDB. We might revoke this investor or legally license them accordingly. I have believed different institutions do the necessary follow-ups. Okay. Charles, I think she's answered your question.
Yeah,
some of the issues.
Revoke.
Debbie also continues by saying that I strongly believe supervision and follow-up on investors right after RDB registers them is strictly being done, but definitely more efforts should be done. Every investor has an institution they fall in, and that institution has requirements to be met, and these investors have to comply. Thank you very much. The next tweet...
It's a shame it's an anonymous account.
Yeah, but the person says that
they work at Rura.
So I think the person works at Rura.
Rwanda's regulatory agency. The next tweet is from Richard, who says, again talking to our segment on investment, he says that ensuring ease of doing business in Rwanda is RDB's mandate. Access to cheap capital for SMEs is a major hindrance. Firms are closing down because of cash flow constraints, slowing down the economy. I am not sure if this issue is getting the attention that it deserves. Hashtag high international rates. Interest rates, yes. Very valid point, Richard. The next tweet we have is from Peggy, who echoes Berna. And Peggy states that I agree with Berna, scrap Miss Rwanda, waste of funds and time. Money can be spent educating needy girls.
Oh.
I wouldn't...
Coming from Peggy, I think it's a very loud statement.
I wouldn't be that extreme. I honestly understand those who are the fan of the show and who take it as a light, a light moment. It's good, it's all right. But for me, no. I think young girls deserve better. They deserve to aspire to bigger dreams. And if in a world where we have scarce resources, those resources should be going to where, a sustainable way of building these girls. Yeah.
Yeah, you keep on saying I have very strong opinions. Thank you for sharing them, and you do raise valid points, Brenna. But of course, I like that you're also, balanced in the sense that for those who benefit from it, for those who it works for, absolutely. I mean, if it's something that they want to keep on doing. And we're coming towards the end of the show. I would like us to give closing remarks on other issues, either that caught your attention or some key expectations you have for the year 2020. Charles, Brenna.
I think the one issue we didn't mention was the Transparency International report.
Yes.
Rwanda remains among the least corrupt countries, but I'm concerned that the perception has changed. Yeah. There are actually slightly more people who feel there's corruption. And you see, perception usually influences more decisions than even the reality, how you're perceived. Yeah, so I think for people in charge of, monitoring these things, that's an eye-opener. Yeah.
Okay.
My parting shot is really around good neighborliness. We did hint a bit on this 2 shows ago. Today the head of state did talk about it during the diplomatic luncheon. I think it's one area that we need to very, very closely watch. We're not at the best of terms with Burundi. We're not at the best of terms with Uganda. We have improving relations very, very with the DRC. We have very with Tanzania. Maybe 5 years ago it wasn't as good as it was today. It's looking extremely good. We do also have major concerns with these neighbors whom we're having quarrels with. Should we be optimistic? Definitely yes. Should these problems be solved as soon as yesterday? How quickly do we want them solved? As I said yesterday, I want I want to see how the next quarter is going to be in terms of our neighborly relations. Yes.
Great. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Brenna. This was the 7th segment of our Burning Issues edition, where we, the resident panelists of the Squares, we don't have guests. We just sit amongst ourselves and discuss issues that you, our viewers, put forward to us. So thank you. Please keep the conversation going regarding other burning issues using #TheSquareRW. We'd like to thank our partners, Uzi Collections and Bourbon Coffee. I saw a tweet asking why there's Bourbon Coffee mugs here. This is because Bourbon Coffee is a partner. We try and keep Made in Rwanda something that is big on the show. So thank you very much to our partners. And to our viewers, please keep the conversation going and see you again next week, same time. Have a good evening.